Hi, Sam here. Um, so don't worry, I'm not going to be discussing the Odyssey for an hour. Instead, what I'll be doing today is I'll speak for 5, maybe 10 minutes at tops, and then I'm going to include a link for a song that I would like you to follow at the end of the video. The song is Hard to Get by Rich Mullins. I've had it in my mind because we've been doing these discussions of introduction to Christianity, and this song in particular was one that I thought intersected well with the themes of the book. And sometimes you read these like long, kind of thinky, talky uh, works of religious philosophy or theology, and they definitely have their place, but I also feel like there's points where music does a better job of explaining the same ideas because it brings a sort of emotional layer to it that you don't necessarily get in just the written word. And at its best, it also brings in a kind of community and discussion between people. So, um, with that, in our last discussion, we had a question of who is God in the Christian tradition and in the Abrahamic tradition more broadly. And you have two concepts that are on their face, maybe seem somewhat contradictory, where you have the concept that God is no thing. So God is not a place, God is not an animal, or God is not a person. So Christianity, along with Judaism and Islam, it's not a cultic religion. Um, but then you also have the concept where Christianity also rejects the purely Platonic notion of God, where God is just being. So you have this thing where God is present in the world, but he also remains hidden. So, for example, Moses, he goes to Mount Sinai, he encounters God, but God does not show him his face. And with that really is kind of the situation that Christians often have where they encounter God and they feel his presence, but they also feel an absence. And it's what Mullins talks about very artfully in the song that I'll link to. He uses three concepts. He uses a contrast between heaven and earth, um, radiance and skin, and eternity and time. And he forms the song as a prayer, and in it, he um, sort of he uses a term that he's not that it's overly harsh, that he's lashing out at God, and in that, I mean, it is a real question. Where is God in suffering? And I was thinking about it in terms of Christian theology, and the answer is that, that God doesn't fix the world. Donald Miller, one of the things he talks about is he often pictures a infomercial with the apostles in his head, and if you looked at the apostles and like where they were when they began and what they got from the following Christ, I mean, it wouldn't line up as a neat consumer good. And instead, a lot of what had happened was suffering and difficulties and things to them that where they left family and their, in some ways, their faith and in other things behind for when Christ said, "Follow me." So, I mean, with that, I mean, the promise of the scripture isn't that God fixes every problem. What it is that God is Emmanuel, God with us. And in some ways, the answer to the question, does God hear our suffering, is it's Christ on the cross on Good Friday. And it's not the notion that God will relieve every suffering, but it's that God has been with us in our suffering. Well, that's about it. Yeah, listen to the song, and hopefully I'll see you guys around here again, and have a blessed Easter, and He is risen.